Hello and welcome into Reality Check. I wish you guys could see the background. It was just me and Jeremy just dancing to the little intro music. It's fitting. I also realized in my rush I misspelled free agency. I put an M instead of a C. I'm not going to change it. We're going to rock with it because that's what we are today. It's been a busy day. But Jeremy, how are you? How you doing?
Oh, so wonderful, so wonderful. Reading so many beautiful things online on Twitter about every single player that's released that we should, of course, sign, and every player that's on the trade block that we should, of course, trade for. It's a wonderful, wonderful world in Jets world.
Yeah, so it is the week before free agency. Can I give you some good news? At least by this time next week, we'll have some new players that we could talk about and break down and their impact. So this is the last kind of like preview before we really get into it next week. But yeah, you mentioned it yesterday. We saw two wide receivers get released: Christian Kirk and Tyler Lockett. I take it not much interest from your end on either of those two guys.
I mean, if Kirk was cheap and they brought him as a WR3, I understand that. I believe for our roster to really compete for deep playoffs, championship type of thing, we're not doing that this season, and it's going to be at a minimum a 2 off-season build, not a rebuild, but a retooling that's going and a repairing that's going to take, to me, 2 off seasons to accomplish. So if you don't get your guy, you know what I mean, the man that's going to be opposite of Garrett Wilson in the first year of that 2-year process, and you brought in a guy like Kirk in an affordable contract, I don't think people would be thrilled. He's not very good, but again, I could live with it as long as we don't pay him a ton of money in a long-term deal with the expectation we're winning the Super Bowl. I would think, though, that a guy like that or Lockett, all of those guys would be WR3 type material and just extra depth on the roster, but none of them excite me as like the guy to be opposite of Garrett Wilson.
I agree with you. And the point that I made in my video reacting to it yesterday, because naturally, like wide receiver position of need, those two guys get released. DK Metcalf trade rumors. We'll get into that in a little bit. A lot of Jet fans were talking about it, so I wanted to, share my 2 cents. And honestly, I don't know if either Tyler Lockett or Christian Kirk are great fits for the Jets. And I have a couple reasons for each one. Christian Kirk had 2 pretty severe injuries the last 2 years. He missed 5 games at the end of 2023 with his core muscle. I don't know if he strained it or what, but it was a core injury that sidelined him the remainder of the season. Suffered it in November and did not return. This past year, broken collarbone. He played like 8 or 9 games this year. So he's gotten hurt each of the last 2 years. He's 29 years old. I worry about him, starting to break down and show some signs of, not maybe being all that effective. Plus, he's on the smaller side. Like, not saying that the Jets, they can't target a smaller receiver, but with how the Jets seem to like to use Garrett Wilson, they like to bounce him around between the slot and at the outside. So my interpretation of the offseason, you tell me if you feel differently, if I'm off base here, but I was thinking the Jets would target like bigger wide receivers, guys who could contribute in the run game as blockers, guys who can go up and high point the football, contested catch guys, red zone targets. I think a Joshua Palmer is maybe a better fit. He's a bigger wide receiver. I know Tim Patrick has injury concern, but has the connection with Detroit and Darren Muji, and he's a bigger receiver. So that was kind of the tier I was thinking of, rather than the, guy who was pretty good like 3-4 years ago, is starting to show age and is a little bit on the smaller side.
Yeah, that's why when I talk about WR2, for sure, that's what I'm saying. Cheap, temporary until you find the guy. Or I like, for example, in the draft, and I like that if you're going to address it this year and say who's going to be your guy opposite of GW this year, then yeah, the complement is going to be a bigger receiver. Like from the draft, that's why I like McMillan. If he's there at 7, it looks like more and more like he might be because he refused to run at the combine. But also, if you don't go with McMillan in the first round, a guy like from Iowa State, Jaden Higgins, who's another guy like a bigger receiver, contested catch type of guy, definitely the right kind of fit, I think. If you were to bring in a Lockett, that would be your slot receiver veteran. You know what I mean? Like, and it wouldn't excite anybody. There's nothing exciting about it. And I feel the same way about Kirk. I mean, these are just fill-in guys, but understand, outside of talking just about wide receiver, if we talk about it honestly from the starting 22, the reason I'm saying it's 2 years is because year one, like in this one offseason, there are going to be spots in that 22 that are not going to excite anybody. Like there are going to be spots where we fall short. I don't know if it's going to be WR2. I don't know if it's going to be in our slot receiver and we're just gambling that, on Corley. Like, I don't know what it's going to be, but I think the reality is, and we just don't know if it'll be wide receiver or not based on what they do on the offseason and in the draft, that there are going to be cheap bargain type of fill-in guys because we simply don't have the resources to fill in all 22 starting spots with guys that we love and are excited about, for the long-term future.
I agree with that. And in free agency too, I don't necessarily want to go to the top of the list because usually what happens is the top of the free agent list, they're very good players that get paid like great or elite level players most cases. And we've seen that with Joe Douglas. Unfortunately, he took some bigger swings in free agency on guys that didn't end up working out. Like Laken Tomlinson comes to mind for example. They needed a guard badly. They paid him pretty good money to come in here and play guard. He was coming off a Pro Bowl season, and he was horrendous for the Jets, unfortunately. Corey Davis and Carl Lawson are another couple of examples of guys who were towards the top of the market at each of their position. But on the contrary, you find a guy like John Simpson, who's maybe a middle-tier free agent on the younger side, who's getting better year over year, and they paid him, and that one worked out. I just think they're going to, for most positions, look in that middle tier of free agency rather than going like name hunting in a way.
And I think you have to do that in the phase that we're in right now. We don't even have our future quarterback. We don't know if we're going to have our future quarterback this year. There's going to be, again, doesn't mean we can't compete and try to get 9-10 wins and sneak into a wild card. Not saying that, not saying wave the white flag, but we are not going to complete the roster that's going to be Aaron Glenn's roster. That's going to be what we're hoping will be a competitive team that can possibly win a championship. We're not going to build that in one offseason. And I think it's exactly what you're saying is that you're not at the phase as a team to go for a big name. You try to do that at the end, right? The Rams did that and won a Super Bowl. You try to get that final big piece. The Eagles did that with Saquon Barkley in a smart way, because if you're going to pay the number, that's the highest salary for a position, let it be running back and let that be the difference maker, because that's still not all too high of a salary. So yeah, I mean, like, this is the wrong time for us to be targeting big names. We're like, there's going to be a 2 to 3 year process here to really get up to championship level, and bringing a big name right now and overpaying doesn't make sense. Let's get in role players that are really solid at the position, that allows the coach to change the culture of the locker room. And let's add as much big talent as we can, part of it this year, the rest of it next year, and then so forth and then on,
Can I have one, there's one like chink in the armor for what I just kind of said, and that they're not going to go like necessarily big tier hunting. I do think at the safety position, they'll spend a little bit of money, and not like Javon Holland, $20 million a year, but I think they'll sign someone in like $12 to $15 million a year range. Sure. Justin Reed, who I know you like a lot. Me, Cameron Bynum is someone that I really like a lot. I think they'll be somewhere in that range because they need to probably find 2 starters there. So if I had to predict the spot where they might pay up a little bit, I think it would actually be safety this offseason.
Right. And what's great is, like I was talking about running back, safety is another position that, except if you're the elite top 2, aren't the big money positions, right? It's not like a wide receiver or a cornerback that demands $30 million. And those are the contracts we're going to have to reserve and keep on hold for guys like Garrett and Sauce. So, yeah, it's a value position. Safety is the kind of position where for that 12 to 15 million, you could fill that room, or at least put half of that, take care of half of that room. Tight end's another place where we need to. Maybe we go for a $10 to $12 million tight end and then draft a tight end. Because as much as I love this draft class for tight end and say we could draft 2, going into this season without a veteran, without a tight end with experience, that's not a great proposition either, because tight end is a position we've seen most of the time, except for the outliers, take time to develop. Like it's like they don't come out in their prime year one. So I agree 100%. I think there are certain places we're going to spend money. We do have 70 million. It's not like we don't have any money, but I don't think you're going to see a $30 million to $35 million superstar signing. That's kind of like, reminds me of bad strategy, like kind of like the Le'Veon Bell thing.
I'm with you on that one. Hennessy Heisman's hanging with us. He sends in a super chat. Thanks for supporting, Hennessy. He goes, Tyler Warren helps in the run and pass game. We could also trade down and still snag him. Hope we can get more draft picks and load this team up. I'm with Hennessy, man. And I know for 7, like some people think that 7 might be too rich for Tyler Warren. And in a perfect world, you slide back a few spots, get an extra second round pick, and then take Tyler Warren. I have a really hard time being upset, even if they stuck and picked Tyler Warren at 7, just because I think he could really help out this team in the 2 ways that Hennessy mentioned. He's a beast as a blocker already, and the upside he has as a receiver is something that I like a lot. I'm a huge fan of his game. I get it. There's a good tight end class, and you can make the argument you could take a pretty good one on day 2. I love the kid, though. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, look, if there's a trade partner and you could you trade down and get Tyler Warren, that's a grand slam. That's not a home run, it's a grand slam. If you take Tyler Warren at 7, here to anybody who scoffs at that, anybody's upset with that, I saw listening to some guys in the Jets lounge complaining about it because we didn't take Bowers and now you're taking him at 7. It's a different year. It's a different draft. The reality is it's not a top-heavy draft. It's just not. The value is in the second and third, fourth rounds. So if you take Tyler Warren at 7 because there's no trade partner to trade back, I live with that. That's fine. It's a little disappointing in that we couldn't get a trade partner and trade back. But the reality is it's just not the right year. It's a different draft class. And let me tell you something. If he hits, you don't care where you took him. And the one thing I love about Warren more than any other part of his game, like that I could say about him, as good as he is and versatile, he could do everything. Fullback, he could block, he could play in line, he could be a receiver. He's a Jeremy Shockey, Mark Bavaro, if you used to watch the Giants like I did when I was a kid. He's a tough guy, physical guy, all these beautiful things. Best thing about him, I think he has the highest floor in the draft.
Oh, hard agree with you. Like, I think he comes in and is like very good right away. And maybe he's not, the kind of production that we saw Brock Bowers give a year ago to the Raiders, but I think we got to get over that a little bit. The Jets decided to take an offensive lineman in a really good offensive line class. This year's offensive line class is not nearly as good as what it was a year ago, but now the tight end class is really strong. And with Warren too, for the 7 is too rich for him crowd, Daniel Jeremiah released his most recent mock, his 3.0 mock today, and he had Tyler Warren going 5 to Jacksonville. Now, I don't know if I would bet on Tyler Warren going in the top 5, but Daniel Jeremiah is usually one of the more accurate mock drafters when it comes to, this industry. I think there's a legitimate chance that he goes in the top 10. And if it's to the Jets, I would be thrilled, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the rules of drafting is with a number 7 pick is you cannot miss. That kills you, right? I mean, I don't think people understand how much, unless you get lucky, right? Unless you get lucky and you nail someone in the second or third round and you get somebody in one of those rounds. But a lost top 10 pick when you're a bad team trying to rebuild your roster or retool your roster is very damaging. It sets you back. It's really harmful. So no matter what you do, you have to hit. And again, Tyler Warren, even if he's not the receiver we think he could be, even if there's a disappointment there, the way he blocks, the versatility, the athleticism, the fact that you can line him up as a fullback in short yardage situations, very high floor. He's going to make the Jets a better team. And I think that's almost a guarantee.
Now, I'm not saying this is the reason you draft him in the top 10, but something else that I like about his game is he's a former quarterback. So something Penn State did, they ran the tush push with Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
Why can't the Jets, when they get down to the 1 yard line, run the tush push with Tyler Warren or fourth and short? Like, this team is horrible in short yardage situations. Line them up and just pound them in there, man. Why not?
Why can't we be like copy what works, right? Like, if this tush push play really works, why can't we be the team that does it? And we haven't had a quarterback who could do it. Well, guess what? Tyler Warren, like you said, line him up. The guy doesn't get tackled easily, right? He fights everything. He's powerful. He's strong. He's athletic. He could be amazing in that role. He could do a great job in that role. And what's beautiful is if you do draft a quarterback that's physically strong and mobile and able to do that, like a Jackson Dart, then Warren could be the guy that pushes. He could do the pushing.
Sure.
So, you're good either way.
Yeah, or send him in motion and just run right behind, like whatever you do. You mentioned Jackson Dart, and so did Greg in the comments, so I wanted to pull his up. He wants Warren and Dart, I'm assuming, in the first 2 picks for the New York Jets. How would you feel about that? I know you're not the biggest Jackson Dart guy.
Well, it's not the move that I would do, but I'd be okay with it because and the reason I'd be okay with it is, again, yes, I've criticized the guy's mechanics. I'm just being honest about what I see. The results are very good, right? So the fact is, yeah, outliers are rare, but they exist. Outliers exist, right? There are guys in the NFL that mechanically you wouldn't think it should work, but it just does. Now, if they love Dart, if they love him, they're watching more film than I could ever watch.
Sure.
Right? They know more than I could ever know. If they love him and they're not doing it because of the hype and they're not, which team, believe it or not, there are teams that do it. They make horrible picks based on hype, based on the wrong things. But if our personnel department loves him and they draft him for the right reason, if you were able to get Dart in the second round, you're not risking a first round pick. You're not trading up picks to get Ward. You're not really, if you lose that, you might not necessarily be crushing the franchise. But if you hit, the value in that is just unspeakable. Imagine Dart ends up being the guy and you got him in the second round and we're still able to add Warren. That's a beautiful scenario. So while it's not the move I would make, I will not be upset. I would just become very hopeful that Dart is a hit.
So here's with Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe, I'm going to put those two guys together for a second. Both very different style of quarterbacks, but I think they're going to go earlier than where I'd be comfortable taking them. Like, in my just own personal opinion, I think they are more like third round quarterbacks that need to sit and develop. I think if you were to get one of those two guys, you probably have to do it either by trading back into the first round or by taking them at pick 42. So you'd use a top 50 pick on that player. And I just think the expectation that comes with a top 50 pick is very different from what my expectation is for both those guys in the league. I think if they are to be successful, I'm not saying there's like zero chance that they could be successful. That's not fair. I think, any quarterback or any prospect has a chance, but they have some mechanical things, both those guys, that I think they need to work on. And you just know that if even just, let's say in the second round, pick 42, they take one of those two guys, if God forbid the Jets start 2-4 and Tyrod's not looking all that good, it's going to get really loud for the Jets to play the rookie quarterback and let's see what he got. And I don't think either of them are going to be ready 6 weeks into their NFL career.
Well, I mean, if anybody's arguing that Jackson Dart is ready and doesn't need a year and doesn't need to be developed, and they're arguing that he's ready, why are you arguing that he should be trade back? Why are you arguing that he should be second round? Or why are you arguing that we should trade up our second pick? in the late first round to get him. Why aren't you arguing to take him at 7? Like, it's either you like him or you don't, right? It's like what makes a fan say, well, I like Jackson Dart, but not as a number 7. We should use our number 2 on him, our second pick on him, or trade up into the back of the first round. It's like, well, then I'm asking, well, what makes him different than a quarterback you would want to spend the number 7 on? Yeah, right. You like the guy, you don't. You're acknowledging something by saying you don't want to take him at 7. What are you acknowledging? I think that if you watch the film, the one thing we could agree on, or everybody should be able to agree on, when you watch him and you know the system that he's coming from, when he's playing a system and in an offensive scheme in college that is nothing like the NFL, we could at least agree that he's going to need to develop. Even if he's going to be a great quarterback, it's not going to be day one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And for both of those guys. So that's what gives me a little bit of pause about using a first or second round pick on them. Beal says it. Beal 66 commented, Will Howard plays competitive. Honestly, if the Jets are going to take a swing on a quarterback, Will Howard in the 3rd or 4th, I think I'm more comfortable with that than using a first or second round pick on any of the other 2 guys. What's your take on that with Howard or Kyle McCord, or pick your favorite, mid-round swing option?
Yeah, look, if Will Howard came in the 3rd, I'd be like, all right. Because that makes me a little afraid it takes us out of the 26 quarterback conversation, because the 3rd round is still a top 100, still a real investment. But if they love him, okay, we'll see what happens. If they take him in the 4th rounds, I'm fine with that. Like, I mean, maybe he's the guy, maybe he's not the guy. I'm fine with it. I'll just be like, okay, there was probably players I was screaming for that I wanted, but if they like him a lot and they take him in the 4th rounds, I'm going to be like everybody else. I'm going to hope it works out. I'm going to say, man, maybe that's going to be a steal, but you have to understand that's another one. If you take him in the 4th round, that's probably not going to be a day 1 quarterback, although if he's going to be a good NFL quarterback, he's probably more NFL ready than Dart is in that sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because of the games he's played in and because of the scheme he plays in. If you were going to say which one is more quarterback ready to play day 1, I would say it would be Will Howard, but I'm not saying Will Howard is better than Jackson Dart as far as long-term potential.
Yeah. Another super chat from our guy, Abbott, says, imagine Shockey/Gronk in the modern NFL. Defenses can't target or hit defenseless receivers. Warren is a monster, 6'6", 260. Monster running the seam. Good luck. I mean, matchup nightmare. And I get it too. Like, people go, oh, well, you got to take a wide receiver because that position's so weak. And if they take Tet McMillan, fine. I'm good with that. He's one of my, top 3 options for them in the 1st round. But you gotta get past catchers. Like, they're going to use Breece Hall, I think, significantly more in the passing game. Hopefully Braylon Allen as well. He flashed a little bit of that. You have Garrett Wilson. He's going to get a bunch of targets. But your tight end could essentially be that 2nd or 3rd option in your passing attack. And then if you're using Breece Hall as, let's say, your 3rd guy, then you just need to find in free agency someone who could essentially be your number 4 in the passing offense. Can that be Joshua Palmer? Can that be Darius Slayton? Can that be Tim Patrick, someone like that? I think that is a realistic path to the Jets building out an offense.
Absolutely. I think if we do sign a wide receiver like that, we'll still draft one. There's again, and then someone said it in the chat, when the difference between the 1st round and the later rounds is the odds of them hitting. Right. I mean, for a lot of people, that's what you're basing your grade on. When the Jets take a guy in the 3rd round, why isn't he a 1st round pick? Well, it's certainly not because they don't think he can't be a very good player. It's because they think that there's more risk that he won't be a good player, right? Versus 1st rounds are usually more reliable, that you believe they have a better chance of being good. And the stats prove that, right? The data proves that. Guys in the 1st round have a much better chance of becoming Hall of Famers. They have a much better chance of becoming all pros. But look, if you get me Warren and he's anything like a cross between Shockey and Gronk, that's going to be pretty unbelievable. And as far as wide receiver, yeah, get me going back to that point of in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds, This is not a great deep wide receiver class by any means, but there are definitely wide receivers that, if they pan out, might pan out. Like, that have the tools that can get you excited about a wide receiver. Like I mentioned before, the kid Higgins from Iowa State, the kid from Stanford, who hasn't had a quarterback and hasn't had the team to show it off, but has all the physical attributes to be a great wide receiver. There's a bunch of guys that might pan out that you might be able to get in the third round of this draft.
Savion Williams at a TCU,
Yeah.
another bigger receiver. Jack Besh, also TCU, a second round guy that I happen to like. Trey Harris at Ole Miss too. Like, there's decent options. And I'm not saying they're going to come in and be like immediate impact guy, like number one receiver types, but can they be your third option in a passing attack? Yeah, I think there's a path to that.
Right. And then you got the guy out here that's about an hour and a half away from me, Nash from San Jose State, who who's going to be a later round pick only because he doesn't play against anybody, but so he's a mystery. But you want to talk about throwing the dice? Let's say he could play. Let's say he could play at the level he's playing at that level, at any level. Then he's going to be a steal, or he's going to be a guy that finds out it's very different when you play in the NFL.
That's Green Bean's guy, right? Nick Nash.
I don't know. I know I like him. Tigo told me when I said, "Hey, there's this local kid to me that I really like," but I admit he hasn't played against good competition. Tigo said, "I wouldn't even take him as an undrafted free agent. He's not worth the spot on the 90 roster." Now I know Tigo never saw him play at that point and Googled it because he didn't know who he was until I said who he was, and he was giving me that response 2 minutes later. So he certainly doesn't know anything about him except what he Googled. If Green Bean likes him, it makes sense that, because he's a big, strong, physical guy. But, it's a giant question mark on the kid because he's playing at San Jose State. Like, he's not being covered by the level. The cornerbacks that are covering him are not anywhere close to the level of cornerbacks that he'll be playing against in the NFL. And
that's why he's a late day 3 guy or UDFA guy and not someone who's going to go in the top 3 rounds.
Exactly. But he's a fun guy to take a shot at. Because he's only been playing wide receiver for less than 2 years. He was a quarterback that they converted. And he's like leading all of college football and everything. So it's hard not to be intrigued by a guy like that.
Absolutely. We're talking a lot of wide receivers right now. I know I mentioned a few in the free agent pool. Is there any names that jump out to you that you're like, that you think would be a good fit for the Jets in free agency at wide receiver?
I don't know if there's any real long-term answer right now, as far as the next 3 to 5 years or like 2 to 5. Like, I think it's more of just free agent guy. I think is going to be a fill in the gap because you got to field a team, right? And it can't be a joke. You got to make some effort in this, right? I mean, I would hope people are mad enough about the whole quarterback situation. So it's really, I don't see a lot of guys. I see more WR3 types than I see WR2 types. So it's tricky. I mean, Kirk with the injury history, DK Metcalf, it's a joke. I saw they're saying that he's going to want $30 million a year, a first round and a third round pick. You got to be that would, I would wave the white flag and take a 3-year vacation from watching the Jets if our GM did that, because that would be about the dumbest move in history. So I just don't see, I don't see it. There's nobody that's really getting me all excited and jumping up. I like some of the names that you're saying for just temporary bridge guys, like a bridge number 2 receiver, and then see who you draft, who's going to be there in the draft. And then, next year we get the quarterback, we figure things out, and then we get more serious about who's our number 2 receiver going to be. Maybe it's a guy we draft and develop, this year. And by their second year, they're going to be more ready to step up in that role. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if we take McMillan, then I think he steps in day 1 as our WR2.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And that fits the profile that I think the Jets are looking for. I don't know if I got your take on that. Do you agree that they're more likely to go bigger, more physical than they are smaller and finesse receiver?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. If you look at, I mean, it's weird. You can't look at you can't look just solely at like Detroit, like just because he's comes from Detroit as the passing coordinator. I just think that when you look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, He definitely is your quick, crisp, route runner, off the line of scrimmage really fast, quick pass plays because he can get off the line of scrimmage and get open really fast, find space really fast. And I just think it feels just natural in football that a good complement to that is, okay, I got the guy who can do that. I don't need a guy I could snap the ball that I have to do a quick pass to. I got that guy. Now I want the guy who could go into the corner of the end zone. Now I want the guy where my quarterback is looking into the second, third progression, a guy who then deeper into the play could physically, or create space with his size or just throw it up there when you need to. It's just the right complement when you think about what you want on the field, unless you're getting that at tight end and say, I want a super quick guy because I'm going to be playing a lot of 12 personnel. So I'll go with my Tyler Warren and Garrett Wilson. Tyler Warren will be my big, strong guy, and I'll use some quick slotty type guy to be the second receiver. I mean, that's a possibility, but I think that typically, though, more as a standard, I would guess that they're going to go for a guy that's 6'3" plus and could, go up and get the ball.
I want to pull up some Detroit Lions free agents here. I don't know if you could see on the screen, Jeremy, but you did get your eye surgery, so maybe you can see.
Well, if I do this a little bit more and back up, because the problem is until I do the other eye, I can't wear my reading glasses.
So basically, the question that I wanted to pitch to you, looking at some free agents that the Detroit Lions have, any names jump out there where you think, oh, this guy is going to follow Aaron Glenn over from Detroit over to the Jets?
I think it's the cornerback.
Carlton Davis?
Yeah, I think that. Well, I think he's one to look at. I think you got to look at their corners because you got to think that Aaron Glenn has a relationship with the defensive backs on the Lions, that he's very close to them and does a lot of personal coaching for them, and has a connection to them based on the position he played. I think he's an all-around coach, but every coach, when you look at what, where did they play on the field? And even like the defensive coordinator he hired, which relies so heavily on the defensive backs, I think that that's the position where he'd want to go with somebody he really trusts and knows. And we need a guy to play opposite of Sauce. So I could see him going in that direction. And then I don't know. I mean, that possibly a defensive tackle. What's the guy's name? I'm looking at the list. I can't really see it, but I know there's a defensive tackle up there.
That was going to be mine. Yeah, that was going to be mine. Levi Onwuzurike.
Yeah. That's a strong possibility.
Just because it's such a position of need for the Jets, that's definitely someone. If they lose out on Jamien Sherwood, maybe the linebacker, Derek Barnes is a name that's been brought up a lot. Some people think that Dan Skipper, who is kind of like a swing tackle for the Lions, could make his way over and be like in competition for that right tackle spot.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, those are some of the names that jump out to me. I like Carlton Davis. I wonder what he's going to get because his current AAV is almost $15 million a year. I don't know if the Jets will spend that much in free agency at that position, but maybe it would be if it's a little bit cheaper and they view him as someone who could come in and be like, hey, this is what Aaron Glenn, working on an Aaron Glenn defense was like in Detroit, and kind of take Sauce under his wing a little bit. Maybe that's more of a fit than I initially thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. But again, I think that we both agree that we're probably, you have to assume they're going to look more at safety. When they talk about the $15 million range and paying somebody, you'd have to think it's going to be more safety than it's going to be cornerback. Because they might also just go the route of re-signing 𝐒𝐿s, let him compete with Stiggers. And, again, you're not going to fill every position with guys that are going to make you happy. There's going to be parts of this team that are concerning. We're not going to have 22 starters that we feel great about. And that might be CB2 might be the position where that might just be the case. It might be, 𝐒𝐿s competing with Stiggers. And I don't think it's such a horrible thing. I think there's a lot worse CB2s in this league than 𝐒𝐿s, I think.
I was going to say, if I had to guess today, which is obviously subject to change, but I think Brandon 𝐒𝐿s is back on like a 1 year, $4 or $5 million deal. And him Jarek Bernard Converse and Quantez Stiggers battle it out for who's going to start opposite Sauce Gardner. That'd be my thought, at least for right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very realistic thing. I mean, people have to understand, we do not have a safety on our roster that I know the name of. I think there is one, but I don't know his name. We don't have a safety. None. Zero. Kaputs. I mean, there's nothing. So, like, we have to, like, are we going to draft 3 or 4? We know we're picking up some safeties because we're not drafting 4 safeties to fill a safety room, like, so, I mean, something's got to give. We're definitely signing a safety. And then even a couple more. It's just like, which safeties are going to be primary, like, higher money guys that we're planning on, being part of the future of, like, winning.
So you don't think they're going to go 2017 Jets draft, Jamal Adams first round, Marcus May second round? You don't think a first and second round safety to fill those?
No, I don't see that. But believe me, if we traded back and took Starks, or if we took a guy like Xavier Watts in the second round, it wouldn't shock me. It would definitely not shock me. And then if we, my guy is Jonas Sanker, because that's a guy you can get in the 3rd or 4th rounds, and he's the best. I think he's the best run stopping safety there is. I read Dom C's review on him, and I went right into the All 22 and looked them up, and I started watching for myself. And it's like, Dom C is brilliant what he writes, because it's like you could see what he's writing the second you start watching the guy. You want to talk about a downhill box safety? Jonas Sanker is a beast, and when he has to do coverage, it's not a weakness. It's not his strength, but the guy can cover too if he has to. If he has to drop back in zone, if he has to cover a slot receiver, he's not useless in that way. So, I mean, there are directions we could go in both free agency and the draft for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love Dom C's prospect write-ups. It's very hard for, like, someone like me. I do a lot of different things stylistically, content wise. It's hard for me on my own to be like, all right, I'm going to go through and watch each individual guy and write up my own description. But how I like to do it, at least the last few years since we've been working with Dom through Talkin Jets, he has his rankings, and the ones that jump out to me after hearing his evals, then I go and watch that player in particular and see if I like or sometimes I agree. Most of the time I feel like I do. But sometimes, it's not always a 1-for-1 agree.
Yeah, I don't got time to go through 200 tackles and 200 safeties and all the college safeties there are. And it's what I used to do. It's either, like, I didn't really do much prospecting, but if I did, what I would do is I'd go into the mock draft simulator and just look at their list of names and start watching the players. But I don't have to do that, because Dom C starts in freaking October. And by the time I start thinking about the next year's draft, he has a list. And then that tells us who to look at. And then go into the All 22 and start looking at the games that I have and looking for the players that he names. And that's how I do it. And very rarely do I disagree with him. That's the best part about it. And, part of me thinks it might be self-fulfilling prophecy, because Dom has already put it in my head. And I know that Dom is really good at what he does. But it feels good when you look at it yourself and you can see it. And you could say, well, I see what Dom C is talking about. Like, it's making sense to me. And then that's how you learn and grow, right? Because when I know personally for me, now I could look at a different safety and know what I'm looking for, because I have the words of Dom C and watching another guy who does it.
Exactly. Colin chimes in. He says, why not just take Starks at 7 and then do offensive line or tight end in round 2? Do you think Starks would be in play for the Jets at 7?
I mean, look, it's the same answer as taking Tyler Warren at 7, right? It feels really rich to do that. But the explanation would be the draft that we're in. We're in a bottom heavy draft where the guy we take at 7 might in other years not really be a 7. I think that Starks is more of a mid-round safety. He's a guy, which is still great. I just think there's a little bit, like, he's not a world-changing generational type safety that you take in the top 10 normally. Like, there are special guys that in college that you just like, oh, I got to have that guy. Starks is really, really good. and I really, really like him. And if they took him at 7, because of the year it is, I wouldn't cry about it. I would understand that it's the year that it is. But if you ask me my preference, I would prefer we trade back and get him, because if we trade back and he's off the board, it doesn't matter, because Nick, I can't say his last name. There's another safety that's really good. Yeah, that we could grab the other safety, or we could grab Warren if we traded back and the safety wasn't there. And if he wasn't there, we could grab Ibuka, and get the wide receiver that we need or want, because he might be there. And if he's not there, you could take Bridgelove, the tight end from Michigan. So if we trade back, there's so many guys that will be there. So it's not like we're going to screw ourselves if we trade back.
I was going to say, you mentioned Nick Emenwari. I was going to say, like,
well, I didn't. I said Nick, whatever his last name is.
Yeah, but I knew who you meant. My relative, it's slightly hot take. I think there's a chance Emenwari goes before Malachi Starks in this draft. I think the NFL really likes Nick Emenwari, and I've seen him rising up a lot of rankings after the combine, and I don't think that's I think there's a reason behind it. I think that the NFL, like the scuttlebutt around the league, is that they are they're higher on Emenwari that maybe the consensus like scouts are.
I agree 100%. It's not even a hot take.
Okay.
I don't consider it a hot take. I don't think it's like out of this world or crazy. I think it's definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, if Starks is holding on to a 60-40 lead in percentage of the GMs and who they would take. Like, I don't think, I still think Starks is the higher ranked safety. He's still I still have him above Nick on my board, but I think it's incredibly, it's after the combine. I think it's getting closer and closer, with people who are looking, when you're reading and you're seeing what's going on. And I don't even think it's that much of a surprise. It's kind of like when we took, what's his face? Our center,
Joe Tippmann.
When we took Tippmann, I was going to say Tippett. When we took Tippmann over JSN, was it JSN? That was, yes, John Smith.
No, they took Will McDonald in the first round over.
No. I'm saying we took the center Tippmann over the other center.
Not JSN. John Michael Schmitz.
John Michael JMS. But anyway, it was like that. Most people expected him to go before Tippmann, right? But it wasn't so shocking when it happened that Tippmann went above him. Like, it wasn't ridiculous where people were like blown away by it. Like, how did this happen? So I think it's that kind of situation. I think either safety could go over the other one. I don't think it's like so cut and dry.
And again, this isn't me saying, hey, just because of his combine, like now he's definitely the number one safety, but his RAS score, he scored a perfect 10. Like, he's clearly an athletic freak.
Yeah.
And some GMs, not all, but some GMs really look at this and go, that guy has the traits. I think he is going to be the better player at the next level. So that was basically my reasoning behind it.
Well, love him or hate him, and this don't hold this against the player in this situation. But Joe Douglas was that kind of GM, right? I mean, he loved Roskar, like he loved it. So this would have been, that would have had him written all over it. But the bottom line is whether it's Starks or him, like either one, if it came after a trade back, is a great thing. At 7, it's kind of like that punch in the gut. It's just like, well, that's the year and that's the draft, and this really is the draft to just trade back and get more picks in the second and third. The meat of this draft is picks 30 to 60. There's a lot of meat in this draft, and even beyond 60 to 100, there's still a lot of guys.
Yep.
Like in defensive tackle, tight ends, some guards. There's a lot of hidden guys in this draft.
Michael is saying we can take Graham at 7. I love Mason Graham. I don't know if he gets past New England or Jacksonville at 4 or 5. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense, right?
It's hard to believe. He's only moving up. He's only making people even happier, right? Like, a lot of times people trend different directions. He's trending up, so it would be very hard to imagine him being there at 7. Look, I'm a guy. I watch so much on the defensive tackles because there were so many in this draft that my biggest beef with it, my biggest problem with it, is that there are so many good defensive tackles in this draft. It's probably the richest position in the draft, and there were so many guys that if you really want to get a game-changing or day one starting defensive tackle, there'll be a choice of 4 to 5 of them possibly in the second round. Why do you have to take Graham at 7? But that being said, best player available, if he's there, probably. If he's there at 7, he's probably the best player available. He's the most sure thing. He has the highest floor. I'm not going to say he has the highest ceiling because I don't really believe that, but I definitely believe he has the highest floor.
Yep.
Which is super important. I don't love the way he matches up with Quinnen. I think they're too similar. I want a bigger, more run-stopping guy. I think that Kenneth Grant, Graham's teammate, is actually the better fit, and I think it's a better value if you get him if you were to get him in the second round. But if they take Graham, I will not complain at all. I will not complain at all. It makes Quinnen expendable if he argues or if he doesn't get along with the coaching staff, because okay, fine, we have Graham, and if they stay together, you got to be a lunatic not to like that. Like, it's like, you got 2 guys on the inside who could terrorize quarterbacks.
I was going to say, does him measuring in under 300 pounds make you nervous at all? Because for me, honestly, it doesn't. And you could totally feel differently if that's the case. He's just put too much good tape out against really good teams for me to just go, he was 15 pounds lighter than I expected him to be. I'm just throwing that away now.
When you consider the competition, when you consider that, like, he reminds me of Quinnen, and like not last year Quinnen, but before that, in rising to the occasion, doing it in the big games, doing it when it matters the most. I don't care nearly as much about their size as I do. Well, and that's why I said better fit and like run stopping. Like, you're certainly not putting a run stop. You better have great linebackers. Like, the linebackers better be great, and the edges better be very good edge sealers because you're getting more pass disrupt. You'll have 2 defensive tackles that are more pass disruptors if you do this and you put Graham next to Q. Not that they're bad at stopping the run, but it certainly wouldn't be the strength of either one of them. I don't mind so much about the size of the weight, though, because especially for what Graham is promising you and what you're hoping from him, I look more, and I'm more concerned about leverage and how they get, when they make contact and when they're, and their speed, their ability to adjust. But really, just looking at their hands, looking at how low they get and can they get position on the guards in the center is, to me, much more important than their size.
Dano's hanging out with us. Says, sorry I'm late. Did you miss me, Matt? I did miss you. I love when Dano's in here hanging out with us. And he usually gives us rave reviews, Jeremy. He says this is one of his favorite shows.
I know. Dano's the best, man. I had a great time in his show like the other week. And yeah, he's the best. He also has done some great, like, volunteered and just offered me and gave me great graphics work too for my backgrounds and stuff like that. He's a great guy.
Yeah, what'd you guys get into? I know, was it last week or the week before you went on with him?
It was the week before. Oh, we were talking about draft and prospects and everything. We were just talking ball. 2 hours of talking ball. That's the thing you're going to get at Danger Zone, guys. Like, you go to his show, kind of like here right now. Like, you're talking ball. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, we're chopping it up. I love it. So, peek behind the curtain. Jeremy and I usually we'll text and figure out 1, maybe 2 things that we want to hit on, but I kind of love our interaction with the chat on this show. We have our one thing that we want to do, and we kind of just see where the chat takes us. We're just talking Jets, keeping it light, keeping it fun.
Well, I think it should be chat driven because I think the chat is the best representation of the audience and what they want to hear.
100%. Peter S., I love this comment. Another loyal fan, shout out Peter, says, no matter what, at 7, we should get a starter impact player. I think that's a good thing to realize because we can debate and kick around, oh, it should be this position, or oh, it should be that guy. But it's going to be very, very hard for the Jets to screw this up because there should be at least somebody there who they're going to take that's going to be some sort of impact for you.
When you look at the board and consider that at least 1 quarterback is going, and I'm pretty much 90% sure 2 quarterbacks are going. I know there's some rumors that Sanders might slip, but it's Still 80% to me that Sanders is gone, at least 80%, because some team is going to trade up or some team is going to take him because it's quarterback. But when you look at that and look at the other 4 positions and then look at the board, how do you not get a great player? Like, it's just not possible, because there are, even outside the 2 quarterbacks, there's at least 6 to 8 very, very good position players. From great to very good to, maybe even great to excellent. Like, you can't lose this. Like I agree with it 100%. How do you mess this up?
Something I wanted to ask you about as well, because I feel like after these names weren't talked about for the Jets at 7 pre-combine, but post-combine, there's been a lot of this, and I kind of wanted to see where you stand on both these guys. Armand Membu, the right tackle out of Missouri, and Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. What do you think of their seemingly out of nowhere rise and fans talking about them for the Jets at 7?
Well, I've liked Membu. So with him, I still like Josh Connerly the best. And I agree with Dom C on it. And I know it's not a popular take, because people look at the experts and the mock drafts, and he's like the 5th ranked guy, and they're all like, wow, can you like him the best? But when you watch the film, I can't, it's just undeniable to me. Like, it's like he's amazing. Like, the way he has the most violent hands I've ever seen. The way he gets positioned, the way he handles speed rushers, I love Connerly. And Membu is like my number 2.
Okay.
Like, he was already my number 2. He's a guy that I've drafted in mock drafts, and I really like him also. So, my top 5, when I write it out, look very, very different than the experts. I mean, I'm with Dom C. I don't even if I had to rank Will Campbell, if I had to rank him, he'd be like 6 or 7.
As a tackle.
But I choose as a tackle, he'd be 6 or 7, because I agree with Dom. As a guard, he's the number 1 guard in the draft. If I was drafting him as a guard, number 1 guard in the draft. But as a tackle, he wouldn't even be in my top 5.
His measurements too. By the way, we were talking last week, how is he going to measure, and that being a big deal. His arm length tells me he's a guard. So I think you were on the money with that one.
Yeah, and I think that he got the attention and won All-American because of his run blocking. And he's a great run blocker, which is why I would love him as a guard. He's great, and there's a highlight, you can make tons of highlight reels of him just pancaking people in run blocking. But for a tackle, I think we all agree in today's NFL, you have to be able to pass block and defend the pass. And I tell people, I'll even tell you the game. Just go. I mean, it's hard to get film. So I know people don't have access to it. So I'll try to put something out. I watched him in the Ole Miss game in the first quarter of the game against Ole Miss, not even going up against Princely, not even their best edge, a junior. They're going up against a guy who I think is going to be a good edge in next year's draft. This kid Perkins. Perkins owned him. And Campbell looks stiff. He doesn't get good position. His hands get stuck on the outside in multiple reps right in the first quarter. You don't like when I watch Joe Alt or Fasciano, when they drop back in pass blocking, you had to wait maybe 3/4 of the game, 50% into the game, until you could find one rep that was questionable. You could say, oh, with Alt, I watched an entire game and couldn't find a rep I could criticize.
You watched 3 games.
And now we're talking about Will Campbell as a top 10 guy, and it took me 5 plays into the film to be concerned. 5 plays, and I was like, what? It looked nothing like Olu or Alt or J.C. Latham. It looked like it's not even close in pass blocking. So to me, he's a guard. I simply would not take a guy, a tackle, who on film is so often out of position and getting beat, in college.
Okay. So Membu, you're kind of good with because you like him as a prospect. I think he's the best pure right tackle option for the New York Jets if that's the route they want to go. How about Shamar Stewart? The sack production is not there, but another athletic freak who seems to be in the backfield making plays and wreaking havoc, even if he's not necessarily finishing with sacks.
I don't think we're the organization that could take that chance. I think it's like you once told me something when I first ever called into you about running back. You said, Jeremy, that's a luxury pick. That's what you told me. Luxury pick. I think that's a luxury pick. That's for a team that is pretty solid anyway and could take a little bit of a gamble and try to get a superstar. But we need a guy with a high floor. And any guy who doesn't have it on film doing it, you're just relying on athleticism. The floor is too low. And the perfect example, different position, is Trey Lance. The floor is just too low. Because if you're wrong and he doesn't do it and he's just a great athlete, then you have a Trey Lance. You have a great athlete who just can't play football.
Or Vernon Gholston, even same position. Jets took him 6th. He was a athletic freak and did nothing at the NFL level, unfortunately.
Right. There's a difference between being a football player and an athlete. It's nice when they're combined together, but unfortunately, it's not always the case.
Yeah. For me, I just think there will be better options available for the Jets than either Membu or Shamar Stewart. But of the two, just because they've been the flavor of the week, I think Membu makes more sense for the Jets.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because at least his film looks good. Like he's an all around, there's balance there. He gets, so when you watch the film, he's a good player still, right? I mean, and then if he helped himself because of the athleticism, sure, great. But at least there's evidence that he can play the position. If I'm going to go edge anyway, by the way, if I'm going to go edge in the second round, if that was the direction we were willing to go, I'm hoping that a guy like Green is going to slip. There are guys I'd much rather have than Shamar anyway.
I like Mike Green a lot too. I think if the Jets were to trade back, I think that would be a good potential option for them.
Well, he had the best rep in the Senior Bowl. It was one rep, but literally, and it's so funny, it's a true story. He had a rep that was so dominant, that was so impressive. We all made a groaning noise, because we all couldn't believe what we saw. He went right through the guy, threw him away, was at the quarterback. And a couple of guys behind me said, he's on a plane. He's out of here. This was the second day of practice at the Senior Bowl, because that's what happens. If you do really, really well at practice, a lot of the agent says, you made your mark, leave. Don't risk an injury. And I heard it from 3 or 4 people. I go back to Dom C and Dylan, who who I'm there with. And they looked at me and they said, I don't think Green will be at the convention center tonight for interviews, because I think he's going home. Everybody said the same thing. He can go home now. And sure enough, that night we go up there. They have a list of the players who went home or whatever, or the tweets, people sharing the information. Green went home.
Jermaine Johnson did the same thing 3 years ago now at this point.
Yeah. From one rep. He did the one rep. He said, okay, I'm done. Encore. I'm not going to be any better than that. That's the note I'm going to leave on.
Yeah, because it's a showcase. That's what it is. No one really cares about the game at the end of the week. It's, go out, do something good in practice, make your mark, and then don't get hurt. Go home.
Absolutely.
So I love it. We're just about reaching the 4:00 hour now. So just figure we close with this. A week from now, free agency, we'll have some names to talk about. Give me one prediction. It doesn't have to be a player in particular. It could be a positional group. It could be whatever you want it to be. Prediction for a week from now when we're doing our show. Something that happened in free agency.
We're gonna have this. I'm gonna make 2. The obvious one, we're gonna have a safety that makes between $12 and $15 million a year. And number 2, we're gonna re-sign Brandon Echols.
I like both of those, and I agree with both of those. Mine is that Levi Onwuzurike from the Lions will be the Jets' first free agent signing, 4 minutes into the tampering period. It'll be 12:03, and we get the notification Jets signed Levi Onwuzurike for 2 years, $15 million deal or something like that. And my other one is that Jamien Sherwood stays. I know it seems to be I felt myself going back and forth on this one. I think for a while I was more, I think he's going to leave, but just something in my gut is saying he's going to stay, and the Jets sign him for 3 years at around $10 million a year, plus or minus $1 million, something like that.
I love that take, because that size contract is value, even if he's a backup.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll have some new names to talk about. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Jeremy and I will be back next Thursday. I'm Matt. He's Jeremy. We will catch you next time.